Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to decode a topic that usually gets treated as this vague, mystical, or purely spiritual quest. Yeah, we're talking about the search for purpose. But as we'll see as we unpack the latest research, philosophy, and hard neuroscience today, finding your purpose isn't just some nice-to-have luxury. It's actually a fundamental, hardwired biological necessity. So we're going to break down exactly how you can architect a life of meaning, relying entirely on science-backed frameworks. Let's get right into it. Okay, what is the purpose of my life? It's probably the absolute oldest question humans have ever asked. It was etched into cave walls, debated in the ancient lecture halls of Athens, you name it. But I want you to think about why this question feels so uniquely urgent for us right now in our modern era. We live in a world of just extraordinary material abundance. We've got more freedom of choice and way more comfort than any generation before us. And yet, the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi perfectly called our modern condition the paradox of rising expectations and declining fulfillment. We have endless options, but honestly, less clarity than ever about what we're actually here for. And the cost of that paradox is staggering: 73%. That is a massive number. But that's how much of Generation Z struggles with profound feelings of loneliness. We've built this hyper-connected digital age, right? But ironically, it's created an unprecedented crisis of meaning. When we outsource our most human interactions to technology, and when social media algorithms constantly reward performative self-branding over actual, authentic connection, we don't just get lonely, we lose our why. We're tethered to hundreds of peers digitally, sure, but we're left navigating this vast, empty existential vacuum. Part 1. Meaning versus purpose. The critical difference. To find our way out of that vacuum, our very first step is getting our terminology straight. We usually mix these two words up, right? But think of meaning as looking backward and inward. It's that broader feeling that your life is coherent, that it makes sense as a whole, and that it has inherent value. Purpose, on the other hand, specifically looks forward and outward. It's the motivational, directed piece of the puzzle. It's about having goals and a mission that impacts the world beyond just yourself. So the absolute crucial point here is that you need both. Someone who only has backward-looking meaning might feel satisfied, sure, but they're completely stagnant. But a person with only forward-looking purpose and no overall meaning, they feel like a hamster on a wheel. They're driven, they're exhausted, they're going somewhere impressive, but inside, they just feel entirely empty. Part 2. Your brain on purpose, the neuroscience. To really understand why that emptiness happens, we need to aggressively pivot to the hard science, because a lack of purpose isn't just a fleeting bad mood, it is a literal biological deficit. Let's look at what's actually happening inside your head. Your brain has something called the default mode network, or DMN. Think of this as your brain's internal narrator. It's the network that fires up when you're daydreaming, reflecting on who you are, or imagining the future. When you have a clear sense of purpose, this inner narrator works perfectly in tandem with your prefrontal cortex, which is the planning and decision-making center of your brain, to generate really focused, goal-directed behavior. But without a purpose, this network loops completely aimlessly, and that leads straight to rumination and anxiety. Now let's fold in the seeking system and see how brain chemistry plays a role. The neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp discovered that our brain's dopamine-driven seeking system generates anticipatory pleasure and motivation when we are actively pursuing a goal. Now, notice I didn't say when we achieve a goal. The dopamine hit comes during the pursuit, not when you attain it. And this neurological fact perfectly explains a super common phenomenon. Think about why reaching a massive life goal, finishing a huge project, or suddenly retiring often leaves you feeling less like a champion and more like a deflated balloon. The drive is still entirely intact, but the target is suddenly missing. But when you do have that target, when you have purpose, it acts as a literal biological shield. Listen to these stats: a 36% drop in dementia risk. High-purpose individuals also show a 31% lower risk of functional disability. If you look at walking speeds and grip strengths, they are physically the equivalent of being 2.5 years younger. They even show reduced epigenetic cellular aging. Having a reason to get out of bed in the morning, quite literally, physically protects your brain and slows down the aging of your cells. It's totally adaptive for our survival. Part 3. Purpose across life, a dynamic evolution. If purpose is so crucial, why is it so hard to find? Well, we really need to normalize the struggle here, because purpose isn't a fixed destination you just arrive at. It's a dynamically evolving developmental need. In adolescence, your purpose is pretty much just identity formation, figuring out who you are separate from your parents. In early adulthood, that shifts to exploration and making your first big commitments to love and work. But then we hit midlife. What we culturally call a midlife crisis is actually a completely healthy biological summons. It's a development signal calling you to reassess, to shed that false self you might have built for other people's approval, and to deepen your path. And in later life, purpose shifts beautifully toward generativity, mentoring, teaching, leaving a legacy. So if you feel lost at 35 or 50, you aren't broken. Your brain is just prompting you to graduate to the next stage of meaning. Part 4, Myth versus Reality, the Singular Purpose. This brings us to what I think is the most paralyzing cultural obstacle to finding fulfillment today, the myth of the one grand purpose. So many of us are completely paralyzed hunting for this magical unicorn, this belief that there is one perfect singular purpose with a capital P out there waiting for us. And if we haven't found it by age 30, well, we failed. But the reality is that purpose is plural, it is evolving, and it is highly contextual. I really want to liberate you from this pressure right now. It is entirely okay and honestly expected for your purpose at 25 to differ completely from your purpose at 55. You can have a purpose at work and a distinctly different purpose with your family. We got to stop looking for the one perfect answer and start engaging with the multiple purposes available to us right now. Part 5, Finding Your Ikigai, a Japanese framework. So how do we actually find those purposes? Let's look at one of the absolute most effective tools out there. This is the Western interpretation of Ikigai, which roughly translates to the value found in daily existence that makes life worth living. It's mapped out as 4 overlapping circles. You look for the sweet spot, the intersection of what you love, what you are actually good at, what the world genuinely needs from you, and what you can be paid for to sustain your life. When you align these 4 elements, it creates a profound sense of eudaimonic well-being. That's a deep, lasting satisfaction that goes way beyond temporary happiness, where your daily grind actually makes sense within a much larger picture. But remember, your why doesn't have to be massive or world-changing. Authentic Ikigai is found in the value of daily existence. For example, in Okinawa, one of the famous blue zones where people routinely live past 100 in fantastic health, researchers found a woman in her late 90s whose Ikigai was simply spending a few hours every day carving traditional Japanese masks. That was it. It didn't make her a millionaire, it wasn't solving world peace, but it kept her in a state of flow. Your purpose just needs to keep you engaged in the present moment. Part 6, Practical Steps, Actionable Frameworks. Let's shift to some concrete ways you can literally construct your meaning today. The first is an evidence-based psychological intervention called life crafting. It involves writing extensively about your values, the skills you want to build, and visualizing your ideal future. But the absolute most powerful element here is the 4th step, creating specific if-then plans. Instead of a vague goal like, I want to be more creative, you write, if it is Tuesday evening and I have finished dinner, then I will spend 30 minutes painting. This is called an implementation intention, and it brilliantly bypasses the need for willpower in the moment. You've already made the decision. Next up is the values clarification method. First, you list what genuinely drives you, rank your top 5, and then here's where it gets real. You look for your authenticity gap. This gap is the distance between what you claim your values are and how you actually spend your time, your money, and your energy. If you say family is your top value, but your screen time or work hours dominate your evening, well, that is your authenticity gap. Confronting this is absolutely crucial because this gap is exactly where we locate the source of our burnout, our cynicism, and our purposelessness. So close the gap with just one concrete change this week. But what happens when life strips away our choices? I want to tell you about Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who developed logotherapy, the psychology of the will to meaning. Frankl survived 4 Nazi concentration camps. When he arrived, the guards confiscated a manuscript he had written on discovering life's purpose. In the midst of unimaginable horror, starvation, and the loss of his entire family, Frankl found his purpose in rewriting that manuscript on tiny scraps of paper. His astonishing story proves that even in horrific suffering, human beings retain the ultimate freedom, the freedom to choose our attitude toward our circumstances and discover meaning within them. So if you're experiencing that existential vacuum, that profound boredom and apathy we talked about, know that losing your way is painful, for sure, but it is a signal. Workplace burnout, for instance, isn't always about working too many hours. Research shows it's primarily a signal of value conflict. You're doing work that violates what you believe in. Similarly, grief is a painful process of actively reconstructing your life's meaning after a loss. Across all these struggles,
Think of your internal battery. The science shows the absolute fastest route back to a full battery is altruism. Looking outward and serving others reconnects you to the world, it uses your strengths, and it provides immediate proof that your life truly matters.
And this brings us to a really powerful summary of everything we've explored today. Famously quoted by Viktor Frankl, but originating from Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Meaning isn't just a philosophical luxury. It is literally our ultimate survival tool. It is the architect of our resilience.
I want to leave you with this lingering crossroads question to cut through the noise, the social anxiety, and all those algorithmic distractions of our modern world. Imagine yourself at the very end of your life. What would you genuinely regret not having tried, done, or been? Don't perform for the expectations of others. You are the architect of your own meaning. You can start building it today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to take just 10 minutes right now, grab a pen, and answer that question for yourself. See you next time.